Oxenhall Wood, just north of the M5 and northwest of Newent. Welcome to day 2 of this Gloucestershire ride. Still in Gloucestershire, but definitely not in the Cotswolds. I might tentatively make the case for these woodlands being the northern fringes of the Forest of Dean. Just entering the village of Kempley, where today's forest well and truly peters out. Having ridden through Kempley, I'm well out of the woods now, much more open and agricultural north of the village. That farmhouse on the right is Kempley Court, built in 1689. That farm and another couple of houses are nearly all that remain of the old village of Kempley. And there, up ahead on the right, is Old Kempley's very special church of St Mary, 1.5 miles north of today's village of Kempley. The low-lying situation of the church made it susceptible to flooding, as the centre of the parish slowly shifted to the higher ground further south. A forlorn St Mary's gradually became isolated from the village it was built to serve. Picturesque, with its pink wash, probably replaced an earlier Saxon church on this site. The tower was added in about 1276 during Edward I's wars in nearby Wales. The timber-framed porch dates to the 14th century. Breathtaking. Just look at the pre-Reformation wall paintings that have been recovered from under whitewash in the last century. The walls are covered. The epitome of a Norman chancel arch with dog-tooth carvings, and the chancel walls even more densely covered. These paintings in the chancel are rare, from the early 1100s, the most complete set of Romanesque frescoes in Northern Europe. A vivid reminder of a time when church interiors were covered in such decoration. Tree ring dating has revealed that St Mary's still has its original Norman roof and doors. The roof was built in the 1100s, making it the earliest and most complete Norman timber roof known in Britain. And note the lintel, or as it's often called, the tympanum, over the ancient door with its tree of life motif. And at the risk of getting too churchy, just take a look at this tympanum in the neighbouring village of Dimmock, still in Gloucestershire. There it is, the same tree of life motif, more clearly seen here at Dimmock. Certainly a local school of sculptors at work here in the Middle Ages. And apart from being a medieval masterpiece, St Mary's Dimmock has a permanent exhibition about the Dimmock poets, which included Rupert Brooke, Edward Thomas and Robert Frost. They lived in this area around the start of the First World War. According to the exhibition, two of my favourites, Edward Thomas and Robert Frost, lived nearby. I thought I'd take a look. I'm riding west from Dimmock on an old Roman road to the village called Preston, or rather the remnants of a village. There's the driveway and avenue of trees up to a manor house called Preston Court. I'll take a look up here. After all, the exhibition did say start your walk to the poets' houses from Preston, and I can't find any other way into the old village. Which way? I'll choose the road less travelled, to steal a line from Robert Frost's most famous poem.
Here we are.
I found myself around the back of Preston Court, a substantial manor house and an ancient church, to find myself amongst all this old farm machinery in various states of disrepair. I'd better not block the gates. Map in hand, I'm off to seek out these poets' homes. It's a couple of miles to walk through an orchard, over streams and heavy clay soil. Thank goodness I've arrived in a period of dry weather. With rain, this must be a mud bath. And here we are. That's Glyn Iddens, home briefly to Eleanor Fargeon, friend and biographer of Edward Thomas. Over there is Oldfields, the cottage into which Edward Thomas moved with his family in April 1914. And over there is Little Iddens. The famous American poet Robert Frost moved in there with his family also in April 1914. Again, that's Oldfield, where Edward Thomas stayed. And once more, Little Iddens, briefly home to Robert Frost. Back through the fields. Back through the orchard. Back to the bike. The meeting between Frost and Thomas was to become one of the great literary friendships. Until this meeting, Thomas was a hack writer and reviewer of books. Frost and Thomas went for long walks and discussions in the fields around here, and this was the start of Thomas becoming a poet encouraged by Frost. In return, Thomas reviewed Frost's book of poems, North of Boston, and the poems gained a wider audience. Frost returned to America and much acclaim, becoming arguably America's most famous poet. Edward Thomas enlisted in July 1915. He never saw his poems published as he was killed at the Battle of Arras. You might say this Gloucestershire jaunt has been along the roads less travelled by. I'll let Robert Frost conclude. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. So, if you've enjoyed these roads less travelled by, please like, subscribe, and perhaps even share. I'll then let you know when I'm next out and about. For now, I'm done.